The microphone. Board meeting will start at 6 p.m.
Got wrong. Okay. There was like, they walked in the park that way. And there was no trees. You could wear it. And then right after little like some the tree. But it's not like you guys are walking down. Nothing's okay. Walk stuff off.
Oh. It's like Wednesday.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the November 20th regular board meeting. We will now stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, again, welcome everybody. So lovely evening. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda? Please?
I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Can I please get a motion to adopt the consent agenda? What do you want?
Clarifying statement. We are just adopting what is on the list, not necessarily the actions included in that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Because I'd like to know more about item D and E.
I can share a little bit more about E,
Okay,
and E is something that we do. And then the negotiation and the other part comes in after. So it's this, for item E, it's, do you want to continue with the contract for the third year?
okay.
And then the other piece about the salary comes in in the next couple months.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
item B is a donation list. And a little bit about that, Dr. Everett was talking to some other superintendents, neighboring superintendents. One of them has used this organization out of Seattle. And they donated the funds to fund coaches. And so Dr. Everett reached out to the organization. They've gone back and forth with email and phone calls. The company has agreed, or the organization has agreed to fund 7 coaching and club positions at the high school, 6 at the middle school, and then 4 language support devices. And so they've reached that agreement. What we're waiting on is the final paperwork, the letter that says it's been awarded.
We did, but in our spare time, we're looking at the organization
Mhm.
and what their content and their websites are.
Mhm.
I want to know more before we get that far. I think as a board, we should be made aware of the communication and what's
Okay.
within the stipulations from the content that's on this organization's website.
Okay, so do you want to pull that from the
Yes, I do.
consent agenda and then hold that until the next meeting?
Yeah.
Do we need to pull it? Because this is just, all we're doing is approving the initial letter.
Yes.
And then we're going to see that.
If the board takes action on this and approves it, then what that allows us to do is when the donation does come through and the letter, then we are able to accept it and move forward with the coaches.
So
and
the donation.
Accept or deny.
I think if the board approves it, then we would be moving
So it
forward.
needs to be pulled out.
So if you would like to pull it out, I think you would remove it from the consent agenda.
Do you know what coaches it would start to hire?
I do. It would a general. I have it written in here, they are C-team coaches. And they are 2 clubs chess and esports. And then assistant coaches and C coaches for bowling, boys basketball, boys soccer coach, track coach, and C girls basketball coach at the high school. At the middle school, we are C girls basketball coach, boys C basketball coach, C volleyball coach, 1 and 2. They typically have large numbers, and then an assistant track coach. For,
So would the basketball year be this year?
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
yeah,
So-
this donation would be for the 24-25 school year only.
so that's immediate.
Yeah, it's immediate. And what we have to do is that in June, what we would do is Dr. Everett would meet with an associate from this from this company. And they do a Zoom survey, or a Zoom meeting. And to discuss the impact of these coaches on the students and the programs. As well as they would discuss the pros and cons of the language devices. How they worked, how they were utilized. And then there's a survey that comes out also in May, I believe.
So you find out all the organizations are associated with.
Yeah.
And what is the other school that used their funding?
I don't know off the top of my head. I think Dr. Everett shared that with me, but I don't know off the top of my head.
I would like to know more,
Okay.
but I mean, I'm not the sole decision maker here.
Does anybody else have anything to say?
I make a motion, we adopt the consent agenda.
I'm gonna second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay,
Aye. Okay. Do we have any public comment this evening?
We do not.
We will be moving on to our PLC presentations. And it looks like it's the Meridian Middle School Science team.
While they're getting set up, I'll just quickly remind you all. These are our professional learning communities, so these are our teacher teams that are working, so this is work in progress, daily work for students. Assessed on essential standards that they have around their content area, so the teams you're hearing from today, this is student learning in the middle.
Well, thanks so much for having us in tonight. My name is Frank McGowan. I'm the grade 7 science teacher. This is Steve Palmer, 6th grade science teacher, and Spencer Stuff, the 8th grade science teacher. Throughout this short presentation, we'll each be sharing a little bit. Our goal is, this is our 2nd year together as a team. Last year we came and presented, and we kind of we're building on what we did last year. So we want to show you kind of like our progress over the last year and let you know where we're going. So that's kind of our quick little roadmap for the year. This question of what do we want our students to be able to do? This is the curriculum that was adopted. And you can see there's a lot of different lines and things going everywhere. So when we ask that question of what do we want our students to be able to do, one of the first places we start is with our standards. And we're kind of going to break that apart a little bit tonight as we zoom in to let you know, kind of what we're expecting for our students as they go through their middle school experience here at Meridian. Our PLT, what drives it? We want to develop scientists. And on the left there, you see four bullet points with some bolded words: planning and carrying out investigations, analyzing and interpreting data, constructing explanations and arguing from evidence, and modeling. These are the 4 big areas that we have identified as what scientists do. And through that, we kind of want to build those skills. So on the right, those questions are the ones that we think about and we talk about all the time in our PLT. How do we build the skills involved with the practice of being a scientist? So those are those 4 items. How do we have a shared program so that a student coming in 6th grade begins to learn the routines and the way things work. So in 8th grade, things are looking the same. And they're feeling comfortable as a scientist. They don't have to adapt every year to kind of how one teacher might do one thing. This year, we're really starting to focus on how do we bring students into that? How do they reflect on what they are? And that's what you're going to be hearing about tonight, is how those students start to reflect on their process of being a scientist. And finally, the piece we're trying to work on a lot is that communication. How do we keep families involved in what's going on in the classroom? How do we bring that kind of like a triangle of the classroom, family, student all together? So we're going to zoom in on one practice to kind of show how our PLT works, and that's the practice of modeling as a scientist. If you remember a year ago when we were here, we came through and we showed a lot of different images and we talked about modeling. You'll see some of those again this year, but this is one of the practices of being a scientist. And we just want to kind of keep that as a through line to connect from last year so that you have an understanding of really what we're doing in our PLT and how we're trying to build scientists. And so last year we presented this. This is our 6th through 8th grade kind of rubric. It's the same, it doesn't change. So we can build complexity for students along this journey of being a scientist in the middle school, from learning the technique of how to be a science modeler to kind of what goes into it whenever they look at a science phenomenon, to finally the mechanisms, how they actually explain the science. So we're going to start with that tonight. Again, this is where we left off last year in showing you how we do that bottom part that we expect all students to improve. And we differentiate through the complexity of both the topic that we are studying and the expectation we have for different students. So Steve's going to take it.
All right. So the question at the top there says, how will we know if they know it? And this year, or last spring, I went to an NCCE conference, sat in on a class where I learned about learning progressions, and really thinking about how can we intrinsically motivate our students to think about where they got to go next and reflect on their own learning. So we kind of brought that idea to our PLT, and we switched up the rubric to a more student-friendly version. And we switched our question to how will they know if they know it? So we have our technique and components. The technique's going to be the same for every student while they're in middle school. So all three of us are going to teach the technique the same way. The component part, we build that as a group. So we'll talk with our students while we're within a unit, come up with what parts do our models have to have? What are the things that need to be in our models? And so we put that in the components. And then the mechanism is really the part that we're getting at with knowing if they're understanding the content they're supposed to know. And so as they go through, they're going to reflect on this, and there's questions that they'll ask themselves. And then they place themselves somewhere along this learning progression that's just an arrow. And so they can say, you know, after I reflected after these, I'm going to put myself here, or I'm going to put myself here. And that gives us kind of a view into their mind. If they're like really understanding where they're at, we can say, hey, yeah, I agree with you. Or we can kind of give them feedback on what we're kind of seeing differently. Down here, we're really asking students to think about the evidence in their own work that shows us where they're at.
I like that there's no number on the arrow.
Yeah,
It
it's,
doesn't give somebody like a value,
yeah,
like a fail or an achievement number.
Yeah.
So I like that.
awesome. Yeah, that's one thing we wanted to do too. We don't want to think of this as like a grade.
Yeah.
We want to just think like, I'm starting over here somewhere at the beginning and I'm trying to get over to this side. So this is an example of a student who, this is their first learning progression. They put themselves kind of here on it. I thought they were more here. They checked off boxes here. And all I have to do for feedback is I just circle if I agree with them. And then I want to give them one thing that I think they can work on to improve their skill. So this student, I said, they were thinking about how light interacts. I was saying, why does the light interact the way it does? So we can see their model here. Their first model, they don't have anything that's saying why light's interacting the way it does. And then after that feedback, they're starting to think about the material. They even zoomed in to show like why the light's interacting with that material the way it is. So this is like really motivating their progress. Also, they can kind of see where they need to go on their own. So like, I'll give them like one pointer but they can see, oh, I want to think about why light's traveling the way it does, or why one person might see something different. So the next time they do it, they're thinking about those other things. So now they're zooming into the eye now. They're really starting to think, where do I need to go next? And whenever we model, we give this back to the student. So it's right in front of them the day they're doing their next model. So it's not like I give this back to them. 2 weeks later, we do their model. They're opening their folder. It's right there in front of them. They can see this feedback again and really think about where they're going to go next. This is another example where I talked at the beginning a little bit about how we can see if they're knowing if we can see what they're thinking they know. And so this student thought he was more here. I thought he was more over here. So we put this guy a little bit over here. I had him more over here than over here. And he kind of knew where he needed to go next. So on his next model, he's thinking about where he needs to take his next model and taking it that way. Do we have any questions on this stuff? Sweet. And so I'm going to give it over to Spencer. He's going to talk more about the vertical alignment that we've talked about and kind of where our students are headed, because he gets them in 8th grade.
Yeah. So, still thinking about this. What do they do if they don't know it? They're trying to get them through 6th to 8th grade, understanding, leaving here, knowing how to model a scientific idea. That's one of our core goals. We can pass on to the high school and say, hey, you don't have to worry about them knowing how to even do this. They know the basics. They can focus on the content a little bit more, dig a little bit deeper into it. And getting to add like their own ideas a little bit more, because they're not worried about like, okay, how do I draw this thing? How do I zoom in on something? All this kind of nitty gritty stuff. They don't have to think about it as much. And so last year we came and I talked about these 3 models that were from the start of our contact forces unit. These are their initial models. They come in, we test something. In this case, it's dropping a rock on a CD case to see what happens in a collision. And they sit down and they think about, okay, what do we think is happening at whatever level they're thinking about? What do they think is going on when this happens? And so this is what we got last year. Nothing wrong with it. It's what they're thinking about at the beginning. They're trying to get something on paper, think through their thinking. It's early in our adoption of this curriculum. But we're just seeing kind of general ideas of like, yeah, a rock hit a CD case and it broke. That's kind of where it stops. And then this year, after a year of us kind of working to really bring ourselves into alignment, this is what I got from my first models from this same unit. And so they're thinking about energy. They're thinking about energy transfer, how energy changes. They're thinking about the particle level down here. They're thinking about zooming in on what's happening really, really close. Their thinking about this is really enhanced by being able to not think about like, okay, how do I even draw this thing? They've had so much practice with the components and the technique of drawing a model that when we get to this point where we're drawing a model, they're immediately like, okay, I know how to do this. Now, what am I actually thinking about? What's going on? What's happening with energy? I've talked about energy for 2 years now. What's going on with it? And they take a guess. And it gives us a lot better of a starting point. This makes it a lot easier for me when we're going through our unit. I can say, hey, you guys are thinking about kinetic energy. Maybe we should figure out what actually is happening with kinetic energy. You guys are thinking about particles. Let's figure out what's actually happening with the particles. They're starting at a much higher place because they're not having to spend all their time thinking about, again, how do I even begin? We're taking that off of their plate by being really specific about what we're looking for. And then when they're asked to get to more complex ideas, physics is a lot. They don't have to worry about that kind of lower level understanding of just kind of how we do science. They're already there. They're already thinking about it. They know what to do in a science class. So that's been really, really cool just to see the impact of having us be specific years in a row. I've talked a little bit to some of the high school teachers that they're seeing that with the current batch of 9th graders. They're seeing a little bit, it's a little bit easier to get things moving with them for the same kind of reasons. So that's just been really, really cool to see. And it was kind of fun opening this up prepare, and we went into our slides and we saw these and I went, whoa, that's crazy. I just remember looking at these and there's so much more detail. So that was really, really cool this year. And yeah, so it just lets them focus on the mechanism of what we're doing in a specific unit and not focusing on the technique anymore, especially by the time they get to 8th grade. They've been doing it for 2 years. And the kids that are still focusing on technique, that still need that, they still get that from me. But it allows us to kind of shift our focus as needed. It's pretty cool. That's all I got. Thank you. Any questions for us?
Excuse me, as far as grade wise goes, we're seeing improvement every year.
Yeah. I
Harder
would
to
say that
grade science, I mean,
I would say introducing the learning progressions, I saw more students that were meeting the standard than last year's group. And so, yeah, I would say there's been some improvement.
And from last year to this year, with all three of you collaborating, how have you seen your team collaborate, like, grow?
I would say last year we were kind of getting our footing as far as like, how are we going to align our grading system together? Last year we came and talked about how we're doing standards-based grading a little bit. And this year we kind of are really starting to think about how are we going to help the students see where they're at? And I think the three of us being together for 2 years has kind of been like, well, we're kind of hit that stepping stone. Let's move on to the next one. Where do we go from here? We're already thinking about how do we apply this learning progression to the other 3 skills? As far as like writing explanations, analyzing data, so we can really get students thinking about where they're at.
it's awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, great. Thank you guys.
High school.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You never done
we got the reading high school career, technical education.
Yeah, yeah, I'm here by myself because my teaching partner had a little baby girl
Oh,
Saturday morning.
Awesome.
great.
Eliza Ann,
Nice.
Beautiful.
9 pounds,
Whoa.
19 inches long. So, but,
Big little girl.
yeah,
It's gonna be awesome.
well, you knew my teaching partner, she's only about this big. Yeah, the first class right out of the gate. Anyway, I'm Brent Feller and I'm here representing the CTE department, the ag part of the CTE department. My teaching partner, Maria Nichols, is at home with her new baby, so I'm gonna do the best I can here. So just kind of start. Sorry, that's the wrong way. So my teaching partner is Maria Nichols and our ag education department, you can see how many classes we teach, which is pretty phenomenal for a school our size. There's bigger schools that don't even teach 3/4 of that, so.
Any grade level, sorry, can you grade any of these classes, or do you have to be? Like, can you be 9 through 12, anybody?
Sorry, what was that?
Any grade, take any of the classes?
Yes. Within reason, so like. Ag robotics, CAD, the ag mechanics, beginning welding. The woods one, plant science, floral design, all those. They can take them as a freshman. But some like the woods 2, they have to already take woods 1 in order to get intermediate welding, they'd have to, take beginning before getting in. Same with advanced floral. The ag power and technology is a newer science class that we started about 3 years back, and we purposely kept that as a junior, senior only. And that's a class where I literally delve into the science of what goes on in ag. Okay, here's welding. Okay, this is what's happening kind of at the molecular level, things like that. This is how electricity works and things like that. So it's been a really cool lab-based class. The kids just made stepping stones. So we were talking about concrete. So,
Great, that's great.
so kind of like the middle school guys, we decided to stick with the welding portion like we did last year because we didn't feel like we were done yet. So, but sticking with the welding, so the students are gonna understand different principles, procedures of arc welding process, including selecting electrodes, welding terminology, and weld symbols. And we feel the importance of this is, we've had, I was trying to count it up, but in 14 years, I've had at least 24 kids either take what they learned in our shop and go right into a job, or take what they learned here and go to tech school and then welding as well. So, but in the industry standards, I mean, we don't want kids going into a situation where they don't know how to talk the lingo. So, so how will we know when they know it? Students will complete a pre-assessment. So we started doing this last year to show us if they have any knowledge coming into the class or anything else like that. And it was a formative, so. And then earlier in the year, Marie and I were talking, it's like, well, you know, especially beginning welding, it's a little while before they actually are able to produce anything tangible. So this is where the first weld project, they're gonna, you know, right out of the gate, first thing, we're gonna try and throw down a weld bead. Doesn't take a trained eye to figure out which one's the first one and which one's the second one on these. But, and then afterwards, so about it was about a 3-week interval from the first one to the second one, and you can see the okay. But after that, so it's a little bit jumbled around, but that was sort of the first project in their class. My intermediate and advanced welding, that's a little bit better because I don't have, you know, greenhorns going into it. Maria's already trained a little bit, so I get to polish them. But so this is the beginning welding store for Maria's kids, and this is just on welding terminology. And you can see she had 14 students in her one class that didn't do so well. 7 that were kind of approaching there, and had 1 that kind of knew their stuff. So, and then her replacement will administer the same test at the end of the semester to see where they've progressed. And then this is where the rubber hits the road. So I'm lucky enough, last year, Maria and I both had beginning welding class. That's where we said, okay, let's do beginning welding. Well, she's doing the beginning welding this year, and I'm doing the intermediate and advanced. So I pulled my intermediate class, and a lot of these kids were in this class last year. About 3/4 of them were in this test. And that was no prompting or anything else like that. It's like, here you go, guys, take this test. So they've improved. There's none in the not knowing anything. And we got quite a few that are approaching. So that was kind of the cool thing, that we actually had the data from last year to show, hey, we're actually doing our job. Another thing that we did a little, well, this is a storm river, you probably remember this from last year. We did change some things on it again. We wanted to know what amperage or voltage and wire speed that they're using on their welds this time around, instead of just saying, yeah, I think I had it right. The rest of it is pretty much standard from last year. What we changed though was on the backside, where we want them to actually talk about, okay, what did I learn here? You know, what skill did I learn during this one? how did I get the correct, or how did I correct or improve? And then what am I gonna do next on that one? We added, we're still working on, you'll see in a second, we're still working on the legible. But actually giving them some prompts of welding terminology, whether arc length, amperage, travel angles, travel speed, consistency, cleanliness, slag. Give them those little bit of prompts, so that they can, see it and then put that in their reasoning. So, and so Maria's beginning welding. So you can see on the front bit or on the back, keeping the weld straight and consistent. Consistent arc length, and then on the front side, the kid put, how many amps they're using on the first weld, how many amps using on the second weld. Same thing on the back where I was talking about legibility. We're working on that as well. But the person was, I made circles while welding, which that right now. But anyway. Yeah. So the weld was more consistent on the bottom one. It was bigger and it is clean. Okay. And then the last one, I began welding and struggled with travel speed, consistency, and length. And then on the bottom, the weld was a lot better. Width was a lot closer to 2 electrodes. So they're getting, again, these are freshmen in the beginning welding class, learning the terminology. So this one was a little bit more telling because I had started the kids welding before Maria and I actually changed the back of the grading sheet. So yeah. So on the backside, it was 60-10 triple pass. Kid, the verbiage that she used, welds over welds. Okay. A week later or so, the kid was doing another one, full sentences using terminology and everything. Another student, same class. Okay, what skill did you learn on this project? 70-18 rod. Then learn that if the puddle cuts out, it's hard to start back over, but it is possible, things like that. So so it was kind of fun to actually see that real time. Is like, okay, just a little bit of prompting, these kids are really picking it up. So the PLC, what will we do if they don't know it? What will we do if they do? So after the first common formative assessment, we've identified the starting points for our students. We're going to continue to do lecture, activities, practice, vocab, and identification. If the kids do need it, one-on-one instruction, small groups, and peer teaching. I get to see this a little bit more in my classes where a student that is really progressing. Some of the kids aren't coming, a lot of the kids aren't coming to me for questions. They're going to their peer. And I've listened in a couple of times, like, wow, that kid really knows what he's doing. So, and then how will we know when they do it? We're setting a benchmark of about 75 or 80%. And then proper use of vocabulary in class, student talk, student to teacher talk, and the welder fraction should show proper use of handwritten vocabulary. Okay. And then our next steps, if they don't know it, demonstrations one-on-one, or if there's a group, we'll just grab all 4 kids and say, okay, this is how you do it. Small group interventions using T3. And if they do know it, they progress on to the next weld. And we've set it up to where, the kids start out with, that now start out with this first weld set. And then they do a weld pad, and then they start off with a relatively easy one, work up to the harder ones. So they constantly feel like they're having success, but they also learn from the previous weld on things to do. So. Oop. So, and the one final one. Yeah, this was a graduation gift given to me from a student. This was their first weld freshman year. I believe my first year here. 4 years later, he turned around and says, did his final weld. And this is 60-11 stick weld. And this is TIG welding, which is probably one of the more harder to master welds. And he gave that to me as a graduation present. Which Tyler Pagnoson.
That's cool.
So, does anybody have any questions?
The question I had, so out of the three, so you got beginning, intermediate and welding, so beginning. And maybe things change over the years, but it used to be, when we were in school, Bruce and I think it was 60-13. We got done 60-13, we can move on to 60-11, you know, Rod, and then after 60-11, then we move on to 70-18.
Mm-hmm.
At what part between the beginning, intermediate, advanced that they moved from the stick welding to actually wire feed?
So, when I started here 14 years ago, there was only a beginning welding class and then an advanced. And it's really hard to gauge, you know, where the kids were. So I changed it to beginning, intermediate, and advanced. So beginning, students only learn 60-11 and 60-13. So there's 14 projects in that class. Plus they do a little bit of tap and die and some torch cutting. Because I actually worked with a fella that had gone through a school west of the Nooksack and went through a tech school and did not know how to use a tap and die to make threads in a piece. So I was like, well, my students are never going to do that. So they should have those certain skill set once they're done with beginning. Intermediate, they learn 60-10, 70-18, and then MIG welding and a little bit of like hand plasma cutting. And then once they're done there, then they move into advanced where there's a little bit of 70-18 so they don't get rusty, but it's mainly MIG, both hardwire and dual shield, which I didn't know existed until I started working at Corvette. Dual shield is just a real heavy duty welding process for welding like 1-inch plate. It really digs in, it digs deep. And then from there, they go into TIG welding. I teach aluminum, stainless, and mild steel. And then from there, also spool gun aluminum, so wire feed aluminum. And then also we have a CNC plasma cutter, so the kids learn how to operate that as well.
Well, that's a handful of skill, right? I mean, you probably wouldn't even get that, like some small junior colleges get that level of experience or training.
Not tooting our horn, but I have a friend that works at Bellingham Tech. And he asked me one time, what are you doing? I'm like, am I not doing anything right? They're like, no, your students are head shoulders above anybody else that comes into our school.
These are elective classes, correct?
Yes.
So what's your retention from, let's say, freshman year through graduation? Are we filling all these classes up? Because like you said, we do have a lot of offerings. Are they
Yes.
both?
Yep. Yeah, I've had it where I've had a class of 9, but I've also had it where I've got, well, my intermediate and advanced class right now is 18. So,
And what is a full class for you? I mean, I'm sure it's not like the 35 or 60 that were
so
PEs and things like that. but-
technically, we're capped at 24
Okay,
for the shop classes.
Okay.
So, yeah, you start pushing at 24 and it's like herding cats inside the shop, but it's manageable.
and you had mentioned that for continuous improvement with the program, you've made changes to your scoring rubric. Have you implemented any other changes in the last 12 months for
As far as,
improvements to the program or processes, so the kids are, like you said, you gave them the legible sentences and you added these little terms that they could use. Have you done any other?
as far as processes, we, outside of some specialty stuff like laser welding and carbon arc gouging, which is terrifying. I wouldn't want to teach that in a high school shop. We cover every type of welding that the kids could, outside of maybe going into, some exotic metals like titanium, things like that, but we don't have the budget to try and do that. But also talking to Tyler Pagnos, and he says, well, titanium is pretty much like welding stainless. So.
Pretty awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. The fourth grade team.
There's some.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Okay, well, thank you for having us. We are excited. We are the fourth grade team from IRE, and we are excited to share with you a little bit about what's happening in fourth grade.
My name is Twan Matheson, or Tom Matthijssen. I'm the multilingual specialist at IRE, and so I help a lot of students who speak more than one language in third grade, fourth grade, and fifth grade. And I'm part of the fourth grade PLC.
My name is Taylor Bashirs. I am a fourth grade teacher at IRE. This is my first year here, my third year teaching.
My name is Donald Schultz, and I am this is my second year at IRE and my 24th year of teaching, and I've taught both on West Coast and East Coast.
I'm Stephanie Shipman, and this is my fourth year teaching, fourth year at IRE.
And then I'm Anna Wilson, and this is my first year at IRE, and I'm actually doing a leap replacement for Caitlin Sana. So I'll be wrapping that up come winter break.
Cool. So we really want to talk about formative today, and I'm sure you guys are familiar with formative, or formative.com. It's a tool for online assessment that we implemented this year for our students, especially because it goes really well with our new math curriculum that we've adopted, Eureka Squared. And so we were looking for different ways on how to support our students to the best of our ability. We kind of settled on the formative tool or formative.com because of various reasons. And one big reason was that it delivers a school-wide data. And so it gives us a really big picture overview of what it is that our students can do, and what we can do to support them with to the best of our ability. Next to that, it also gives us grade level data for fourth grade specifically for a PLC to see what our focus would be for each and every module and every topic ticket that we test. We also see the benefit of using formative as a digital platform that students use to take their assessments. Because when we're talking about third graders and fourth graders taking the SBA test at the end of the year, for some kids, they're not very experienced with taking tests on a computer or in a digital setting. And so this kind of prepares them for that bigger test as well, which we think is a pretty big benefit as well. And then the last thing, UEL opportunities from my lens, from a multilingual lens perspective, it gives us a lot of different supports possibilities when we're using formative. For example, imagine you're a student who is still acquiring the English language, you're still learning English. Some of the questions can be kind of hard and tricky, and so formative allows us to actually record the question so the kids get to read it, but also listen to it multiple times or as many times as they want to. And so we're recording each and every single question, and I feel like it's really valuable for especially our multilingual students, but also our students with IEPs, for example. Okay.
Awesome. So we're kind of gonna talk about the process of how we use formative and use it to inform our tier 2 instruction. So we are on our module 2 right now. And we already took a quiz on it, and there was 2 standards, and we're focusing on the first standard, which is multiplying multi-digit numbers by 1-digit numbers. And we thought that was a really important skill because it goes with them through all of their schooling. Plus it has a lot of, I mean, you do it all the time in life. So it's a life skill.
And then we wanna, we think about like, how will we know when they know it? And part of our thinking has to do with, how we're teaching it. So within our, solving a 2x2 multiplication problem, the Eureka, curriculum progresses from, different strategies. And we begin by looking at place value, but we feel that, well, math is all about place value, so that's a big stepping point, and it's the grounding point for us. So they're showing it within the multiplication with the place value, and then we show them the distributive property of multiplication, where they are breaking apart the numbers or decomposing the numbers, which is we're actually like doing more vocabulary talk within our math instruction. So they're using these words that are important, and I've learned that they're using these words in like first grade and second grade. So they're building that knowledge, the vocabulary, and building it up each year, which is really helpful to us and to them as well. And then this is called the area model, where it breaks it apart, which is more visual. And this is where a lot of the students gravitate towards because it's a visual model. And this is a form of the distributive property. And then the final one, this one is called the partial products, which is it's breaking it apart again, but in a different way, and more efficient than the others. And these examples are from our last topic ticket. So these are actual student examples from that are most recent for our share.
So many ways to get to 129.
It is, and what's really amazing is that you give a problem and then I have them to solve it on their own, and they actually come up with a lot of the strategies on their own without even like thinking of it. But it might have come from their third grade experience or just what they see in their mind, because as an older human, like I learned that the standard algorithm, which is I'm sure we all learned. So I didn't learn these strategies, and it's really helpful conceptually as a learner to really talk about it instead of being I'll use the term robot when we talk about math. So it actually a lot of math literacy is happening within our conversation, within our teaching, which is really helpful. It gets them engaged.
I just want to add on to like Donald's saying, this is our first year with Eureka Squared, and that's where we're like really showing them a lot of different strategies, and it really has been amazing. So I just want to great.
And this is the results from one of our topic tickets. Is it the topic ticket, right?
Yes, there's a quiz.
Quiz, yeah. So like, how will we know they know it? So we can see on the visual here, there are the 4 colors. So the green is for those that have mastered it, that kind of shows that they show an understanding of whatever strategy they're choosing to, because we let them choose, unless sometimes we are specific by saying, solve it using the distributive property. And then the yellow, they may have had a calculation error. Like it's like 7 times 3 is 25 instead of 21. So they get the process conceptually, they can understand, they're showing them understanding it, but there's some sort of just calculation error. And then the green and the orange and the red, that's what we will be pulling students to further their understanding and to teach them the strategies more in a smaller group level. And also it's important to share that we are focusing on the students that are below standard and getting them to standard. But when we look at the green, we're also looking at students that get it, and what do we want to do with them? That how can we extend their thinking if they have already mastered it?
So if I can jump in, if you're thinking about the MTSS, like rhombus, if you will, oftentimes we lay our main focus on students who need more support, but what we're trying to do is also support the students who are ready for the next step, who are ready for the next level. And so that upper tier 2 support, or even upper tier 3 support. And I feel like formative is really important to show us that data, like who was ready for that extension.
And then sometimes that might look like, looking at the standard algorithm. Or maybe using bigger numbers, or using word problems, or having them share what is it they want to learn more about multiplication. So it's kind of leaving it up to them.
So if we think about formative and how we're using it, what's really cool is we're gonna walk you through kind of an example of how we use it to inform our tier 2 instruction. So for example, this is one class, so one of our classes, this is just a random, I think this is maybe 8 students. Each column, or I'm sorry, each row is an individual student. And what we've done is we've organized this data so it is based on standards. So that standard that Stephanie talked about originally is how we organize this. So questions 1, 3, 4, and 6 are all geared towards those standards. And we can see, okay, so in this particular class, we're having high success rate, especially on question number 3, 96% on a math question in 4th grade is just, it's incredible. So we're kind of asking ourselves, what is happening in this classroom, or what strategies are working, what strategies we're focused on, because you can see there was a variety. And then when we go to class 2,
Sorry.
you can see again, random, that first class did have some of this red. But what we have here is maybe we have a student who's just really not understanding. They got 14%, so they didn't get every question on this quiz wrong. They just happened to get all of this particular standard wrong. So the reason why we're comparing these two classes is because we are informing our switching time. So tier 2 is really important to be able to give individual students what they need. And we use this data to help us do that. So if we kind of overlay these on top of one another, Tuan, we are going to see that that this strategy, what's really cool about formative is we can go to individual questions and we can see how that particular class is answering it. So if we're seeing a trend that maybe Stephanie's class like really is getting it this one particular way, we can see it all at once. And we can say, okay, Stephanie, tell me about how you delivered that. And it gives us immediate feedback, which is really cool. So right here, when we think about our switching time or our tier 2 instruction, we're going to look and say, okay, whatever class this was, whoever that teacher was, let's look at how these kids are solving it. And then let's see how these kids are solving. What's happening? Are we just having like a slight calculation error? Are we having a conceptual misunderstanding? Formative allows us to see that pretty quickly. And then on our next slide.
And actually,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was thinking
Please.
more about formative is that sometimes like the students will be asked to show their thinking, not all for every problem. Depends on the problem they're asking them to solve. And they'll show their thinking, but they might put the wrong answer in the box where you have to input the answer. So what we can do is after every formative, after every topic ticket or end of unit assessment, we look at their work, make sure that it matches. So like it might mark them wrong on that, but we can then mark them correct or more correct. So there's a range from like 0 to 100. So they might get like 75 or 100 depending on showing their work. That's why, some students are like, I don't want to show my work, it's all in my head. No, actually show your work. It helps us, it will help us help you.
And it really helps our PLT time. We're able to all collectively look at our class, and it's not just individual classes anymore, it's our 4th grade unit. So that's really helpful.
Because like all the students are students, no matter where they are.
Yeah. And then when we take that data that we just went over, you're gonna see this spreadsheet, which is, you love spreadsheets, it's a good one. What we have right now, Stephanie and I are out in the portables behind the building. And so we are the ones who are switching with one another because to give our students access to the building, it requires a little bit. So right now we are switching. And so you can see we have these students listed here as student 1, 2, and 3, but they have names. And for me, my tier 2 instruction is about extending these students' learning. So we're taking students who have mastered that skill, that 4th grade standard, and we're going to start teaching them the standard algorithm. And then Stephanie's class right here has, we're focusing on 3-digit by 1-digit, and kind of using the strategies that work for them. So go ahead.
And we also know like by the end of the year, they're meant to do, the standard was 4-digit by 1-digit. So that's a stepping point for these students by the end of the year. So they're getting more practice with the 3 by 1, but by the end of the year, the hope is that they've mastered the 4x1 digit multiplication.
And for mathematical language, if there's any multilingual students who need extra support, then I jump in with fourth grade and other PL or other grade level groups too, I suppose. To pull those kids and give them the extra language skills that they need or vocabulary that they need, and depending on what that data looks like what formative informs us of. It could be either tier 2 or which is what we've done before, or tier 3 for them.
What questions do you have? Ask those questions.
I actually like one of your comments where you're taking ownership of the entire grade level, and I loved hearing that.
Saying the we.
Yes,
Yeah.
they're all
that's
ours, and so
yeah.
I love that approach, that whether or not they're seated in your classroom, you're all taking responsibility for the environment.
And that's one thing that when I started, Michelle, when I started 2 years ago, or yeah, 2 years ago, whatever. That was told to me by Tyler, like the whole, and by the other school leaders, is like we are collective we within the school. So again, if we see behaviors in other classes or in other grades, it's our job to respond and to react to those. Thank you for saying that.
On a personal level, I absolutely still as an adult struggle with mathematics. But based on all the different opportunities to utilize different methods, I think I could probably redo fourth grade pretty well right now. That one of these ways might work for me, because I wasn't the robotic mathematician type person. It just didn't work for me ever. I was that smart kid and hope for the best.
I became a teacher when I turned 30. And that's when a lot of it clicked, when I started teaching elementary. Yeah. I was taught like 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade.
And full disclosure, my daughter has her master's in mathematics. She's a math teacher, but I still don't get it.
I recommend to our class.
Yeah.
Put her to work. If she wants.
I mean, I did good in math, but as a dad of a 4th grader, when he was showing me some of this stuff, I'm like, what are you talking about, dude? Like,
Have you not seen The Incredibles?
this is not how you do this. He's like, no, Dad, this is how we're doing. I'm like, okay, but seeing all this, it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
You guys tell us much more clear than my 4th grade.
Steve, is there anything that we could be doing as a 4th grade team to inform families?
No, I mean, it's just.
Oh, no, I'm trying to be like, just be clear, like, if you're like, it's exciting that your son is sharing that information and you're hopefully learning from him. Is there anything that we can be doing?
It's a common theme.
What's that?
It's a common theme. What you're saying is common.
Yeah, I mean, this was not how I was taught to do multiplication. So when he was showing me this, it's like, dude, what are you talking about? Get out of here.
Maybe there should be an insert for parents to complete. Bring that.
Well, yeah, I mean, like looking at.
Well, I don't have younger kids, nor so yeah, do that.
Yeah. It would probably be a great opportunity for our public relations to share something about,
Yeah.
hey, Gen Z, X, Y, whatever we are. Here's new math, broken down by 4th grade.
We do host math night. Once every month through the school.
And years ago, I found, when I was teaching in Massachusetts, I found in the classroom that was left for me, a book from 1971, great year as the year I was born. And the book actually showed a lot of these strategies back in the early 70s, which is really interesting how math just changes over time. This goes away, then it comes back, so certain things come away and come back.
He did tell me today, he's mastering math, and I was like, listen, buddy.
But that's what sometimes when students are offered, or learners are offered many different strategies, they glom onto one or two, and then that builds their confidence, and that's what the hope is, that we're hopeful that students will learn to appreciate and to get excited about math.
Yeah,
We need that success experience.
Thank you.
Thank you. Guys.
Thank you. Great.
All right. Mr.
We're
Eric
gonna try this
Jacoby.
after a month.
Yeah.
I apologize, I'm gonna sit down. I found out this week that I'm getting old, so I did something to my neck and my back, and it's
Like put your
just
shoes
not
on.
going away. Well, my wife likes to put the Christmas tree up super early, so she asked me on Saturday to get the Christmas tree out of the shop, and so 6:30 Sunday morning, I went to do it and our 18-year-old and our 15-year-old weren't up to help. So I decided to do it myself and it's heavier than it was last year. So I feel like that's probably just gonna be the way it works, isn't it?
You pull it, getting out of bed.
I'm not that old yet, Brent. So I do want to thank you for letting me add on today. I know I was supposed to be here a couple, or I guess it was last meeting, wasn't it? But I was sick. So I also want to thank Angie and Dr. Everett for working with me to kind of break up our department into different things so we can kind of focus on things and spend a little time if you want to. So I'm here today to talk about kind of how special education is working right now in the Meridian School District. And I want to start by just kind of sharing a little bit of information, and you guys have an information sheet that was in there. I don't know why the colors are so different this year. It has something to do with the new Word update, but I'm going to try to fix that so it's not so painful on the eyes next time. But some of the important things for you guys to just be aware of is we've had a dramatic increase in the number of qualified students that we've had in special ed over the last few years. My first year in this position was 2018-19, and we had 200 students with IEPs at that point. I think OSPI, when I was doing a report the other day, they credit us with 199.53 students that year. And this year on the most recent count, which was November 1st, which is going to be even more updated from that data sheet you have, we had 253. So in the last little over 6 years, we've increased by more than 25% in the special ed department. And I think there's lots of reasons for that. District's bigger. I think there's definitely been some COVID impacts. I think looking at some of these other bullet points, we're continuing to have high qualification areas in some of those related services areas. So speech, language, communication is one of those areas where we have right at or real close to 100 students who are qualifying for SLP services right now.
So is that where we're seeing the dramatic increase? Or can you
The
identify
dramatic,
certain?
I can't pick any one place. I think there's a couple places where it's happening. But SLP is an area of growth. But it's an area of growth where students are coming with higher needs and they're hanging on longer, if that makes sense. They're not exiting as quickly as maybe they were in the past because they're coming in at a greater deficit.
So it's just like communication and behavior,
Yep.
would that be in the, okay.
Communication and behavior can be linked.
Okay.
And I'll talk about that a little bit in the non-academic support areas. Occupational therapy is an area, and another one that's really grown a lot. PT, we have a 0.6 PT in the school district. We share her with Linden. We contract the other 0.4 back out to Linden, and she may, just so you know, Kurt, she might be at an overage here soon. So we're kind of getting to that point, and our department is awash in overages, people over caseload limits and stuff like that right now. We're seeing students who are qualifying in just more areas. So in the past, and I think I've shared this before, when I was teaching at the high school, we had a lot of kids who were reading and writing and math, or it's just reading, or it's just math. And right now we're having reading, writing, math, executive function, social emotional. It might be OT, it might be SLP on top of that. So students are just qualifying for more areas of support there. And so the complexity is that we're seeing in kids is a little bit higher than we've seen in the past. And then what we are seeing more, and this is, I think, one thing that I would say, Michelle, is we're seeing more kids who are qualifying in only non-academic areas of support. So students who are qualifying in behavior and executive functioning, or social emotional and executive functioning, and not necessarily needing support in reading, writing, or mathematics. And I think there's lots of reasons for that. But I think that's probably something we're going to continue to see into the future.
And when were those areas added to special education?
That's a great question. I think that as far as I know, they've always kind of been there. The one that we're seeing more qualification of, and I've kind of put a little bit more emphasis on it within our department, is executive function. Largely because those are the skills that you kind of take to put things together in order to be successful. And I think, you know, and I've talked about this with Adrian, I think we have a lot of students who have academic skills, but their executive functioning skills get in the way of them putting all those things together to do what they need to do, especially as they progress through the school system, if that makes sense. So
Can you tell me what SLP is before you?
speech language pathologist. So when I say SLP, think communication. So not just articulation, but also expressive language, receptive language, that type of stuff.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, feel free. There's a lot of acronyms in special ed, and I do that a lot.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of successes over the last year, and just to highlight a few of them. I've been really impressed with the collaborative culture that Tyler and his team at Irene Ryder is building. They're sharing students, they're working within their team to problem solve and work on systems and all sorts of different things in order to just improve the experience for our students and for our families of students who are in special ed. And it starts with Melissa Whitten in the preschool and goes all the way through, you know, our specialists who work in the building, as well as Karen Nielsen, who works with our 4th and 5th grade students. Meridian Middle School, Todd's behind me, right? Oh, Todd left. Dang.
He hobbled out.
Yeah, but so all three of our, 2 of our schools last year were in the Washington School Improvement Framework, which is WSIF, specifically for students with disabilities, and that was Irene right there in the middle school. Middle school is out of that. We know when I think Adrian happened to just randomly look one day and noticed it. The high school is in at this point. But it is a point of celebration that the middle school is able to move themselves out of that improvement status. This is actually kind of a cool one, and I'm not going to share the student's name just because I haven't spoken with the parents and got permission to do so. But there's been, you know, I want to credit Lisa for some of the disability history and awareness month stuff during the month of October. And we have a student at Meridian High School who really took it on herself to, you know, she reached out to me, she reached out to Sean, she reached out to Patrick. You guys probably know her from the leadership class, and her whole thing is trying to elevate awareness about the disabilities that exist within the school. And, you know, she really looks at it as this kind of a superhero or super skill for herself. Like it's like this thing that makes her unique, and she certainly is that. But I really want to call her out for the work that she's done to do that. And then the other thing that's really good is just from a district level, we had no areas of disproportionality in special ed for last year. And what they do is they look at all the different demographic areas that we have in the school and see, is there disproportionate outcomes for one group of students over another. And we've had in the past. So for example, we had a group of students. It was students who were, I gotta think, Latino students identified with specific learning disability. That was an area where we were much higher than where we should have been. So we had to do some work on why is that? Let's look at what that is. Let's do the work that we need to do to make sure we're identifying students properly. A, do they really qualify? And B, are we putting them into the right category? Which is that on that data sheet you have, that's that table, the different categories on the left-hand side. Things that we're going to have to continue to work on. We really need to continue to work on improved outcomes for our students. You know, not just in school, but once they leave us. You know, we've had some pretty, I feel like we've had some good successes with students that have come through our system, but you know, we have some persistent struggles and challenges in terms of students engaging in specific classes once they get to the high school level. And some of it I think is skill, some of it's confidence, some of it's area of focus. And so that's something we want to continue to focus on. Adrian and I are working on reviewing, researching and possible adoption of intervention materials for reading. Well, we have reading right now, but writing, math, and we've talked about social emotional a little bit too. Oh, don't think I'd do that again.
Yeah.
We're doing some work at the middle school and high school level around alignment between the post-secondary planning, so our high school beyond plan and the IEP transition plan, so that students, hopefully, when they're doing registration out of middle school into high school, that's a little bit more supported by what's in their IEP and what their longer term goals are, to help build some relevance for kids. And then one of the things that I think is pretty cool, and it's gonna be interesting to see how it works out, is I've been working a lot with the North County special ed directors, so Baker, Nooksack, Linden, Blaine, and looking at opportunities for us to align specifically around our community transitions program, which is post grade 12, so 18 through now 22, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. You know, a couple examples, we noticed that we have some school districts who are sending kids to the same vocational opportunity. And so talking about, okay, how can we collaborate, work together? Can we get ourselves on similar schedules, like daily schedules, so that we might be able to share opportunities? There's a group of the North County group has been doing site visits for looking at different employers and different things. And like last year, one of the ones that they were talking about was going to Kent's Garden and learning about all the different aspects of the nursery business and where there's opportunity for kids who are interested in that as a line of work. So it's a great way of us as smaller districts to kind of pool together and do some things that we can't, right now we can't, there's things we can't compete with Bellingham on. And people do look over the fence at each other. So this is a way for us working together to help better prepare our kids for things.
Do you have outside consultants that you communicate with, like Cascade Connection?
Yep, we work with Cascade Connections, we work with DDA, we work with DVR, we work with,
Cause I've worked with them in the past too. With
all the alphabet groups out there that
no, and
exist.
and it's great because they have a mentor or a partner, you know, a partner that comes with them. And
Yep, and some of the housing assistance programs and different things like that. Yeah. Yep, we do. And I'll talk about that actually in just a minute. Actually, I do want to go back to that. So on that collaboration, there were a couple things that we have been doing. One of the things that we made a conscious decision of as a group of 5 districts was to do it's called a roadshow. And we work with ARC and with DDA, and Meridian and Linden have kind of decided that we'll be the hosts. But we rotated around. So like last spring was the first time we did it. We did it at our high school. This last 2 weeks ago, they did it up in Linden. And then all of the school districts marketed. And the idea is to give families an opportunity, if it's closer to go to Linden, to be able to go to Linden. It's hard to get to do things and say, we're going to host it in Mount Baker, or we're going to host it in Nooksack necessarily and have the turnout. And so the idea is, okay, how can we kind of pull together and try to drive turnout across our 5 districts? So we're working with ARC and DDA on that. So that's an example right there, Michelle. So some of the future challenges that I see that we're going to be navigating, I think we're going to have that. Sorry, I've got 2 different things here because I got notes on it. I think we're going to continue to see this rapid increase in unexpected behaviors that you know, I'm sure you guys hear about, I hear about a lot. There's just a lot of complexity in navigating all the unique needs that are kind of showing up in our school systems. You know, I think I'm hearing this all over the place. I'm hearing it when I go to local meetings with Whatcom County special ed directors. I hear it at the regional meeting. I hear it when I went to the law conference in September. There was a lot of the sessions were specifically focused on unexpected behaviors and how to address unexpected behaviors and different things like that. So that's going to be a continued situation we're going to have to learn how to navigate and work to support kids and families and teachers and you know, the school community through. We're seeing an increase in the number of students who need, and this isn't just a Meridian thing, an increase in the number of students who need student-specific paraprofessional support. That's something that we're all talking about right now is what is going on. You know, talking about the increased numbers of students qualifying and limited resources to expand staffing to address that. You know, a 25% increase in the number of students with IEPs And granted, some of those are in communication and different things like that, but we've not really expanded outside of adding a life skills teacher at the middle school, the number of special ed teachers we have. So that's gonna be something we'll have to navigate. School refusal is a new term that we're hearing a lot, and it's really driven by anxiety. And it's, you know, especially as kids get older, you know, families not being able to get their kids to school, and parents and families just kind of at their wits' end about what to do. And so there is some potential impacts on special education around that we're starting to see right now. And so that will continue to be something we try to figure out. And then some of the legal changes that have happened. We have had some law changes in the state of Washington, and then beyond. In Washington state, we've had a Senate bill that shifted the burden of proof for due process from the family to the school districts. So if we are in a due process, with the exception of a unilateral private placement, so I'm saying I'm going to put my student in this private placement and you have to pay for it. In that case, a parent owns the burden of proof. In every other situation, it's on the school district. And if we take that and align it with, you know, some of the other shifts around, there was the Supreme Court ruling in 2017 that shifted how we look at how we measure the educational benefit for a special education program. You put those things together and the job of a special ed teacher is becoming more complex. Now we're going to have to be looking at how students are progressing on their goals, but we're also going to have to be tracking and monitoring and documenting the services we're providing. And we're gonna have to look back over time and look at through IEPs and see, is there an upward trajectory? Is there a flat trajectory? Is there a declining trajectory? And if there is nothing, if there's not an upward trajectory, it's our responsibility to figure out how to adjust that. So a lot of things going on that are gonna, you know, our staff are just trying to figure out right now. The other one that happened, and this is like an example of how the law affects special ed. May 23rd, 2024. So think about where that is in the school year. The Ninth Circuit Appeals Court came out with a ruling against OSPI. So there had been a lawsuit that had gone all the way through to the appeals court saying the state of Washington's interpreted the federal special education law incorrectly. They say that a student can attend school through the year they turn 21, but that's not the way that the Ninth Circuit saw it. And they said, nope, it's the 22nd birthday. So all of a sudden, school districts all over the state of Washington in the span of like 2.5 weeks had to figure out, okay, I have a student who turns 20, who turned 21 2 weeks ago. Technically, that student should be leaving at the end of the school year, but now I need to plan on that student coming back next year. And we had school districts who already had their promotion, graduation ceremonies, who had to go back and try to figure all that out. They're slowly starting to figure out the funding piece of that, but there wasn't additional funding that came with that because it was a court ruling, not a legislative decision. And so that's another thing. We luckily dodged that. Our oldest student turns 21 this next year. So we didn't have that mad scramble that a lot of other school districts do. But like I was talking to, I think it was the director at Shoreline or Edmonds, and they had 15 kids they had to get on the phone and call. So, you know, that can become, and I was sharing with Daniel, like that's a teacher or 2 teachers if you're having to retain 33% of your community transitions program for another year. So thank you. That's all I got. You guys have any questions for me or anything that you are wanting to know more about?
Just kudos, because you're teachers and I don't know, counselors and PT, but that's insane. It's like, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that out loud, but it's amazing. It's like,
Well,
I don't want to say the burden, but everything that used to be at the doctors and this and that is now
It's a lot,
your office.
it's shared a lot more. It's shared a lot more for
shared a lot
sure. And we, you know, we do, I think back to when special ed was in place when I was in school at Meridian and it looked very different than it does now.
Very, I
Right.
mean, even my daughter,
Yeah.
you know, she qualified for intervention preschool or whatever it was back in the day. Cause she didn't walk, talk or do anything. But, it was still our responsibility to do all those other services. I didn't work for 3 years because she was in intervention therapies. And now. it's up to
We have a
school
lot, we have a lot on our plates
find a way to
and
do
we
it.
couldn't, our department wouldn't work without the staff. Like
Yeah.
our staff,
It's
can't say enough
fascinating.
about, they deal with a lot. And, you know, I would encourage you guys, if you ever want to come and do a visit, I would love to give you a tour. Even if it's just say, I want to go look at Irene, or I want to go look at the high school or the middle school. Come see what our staff are doing. I think it would do a lot for morale for our staff to see you taking an interest in what they're doing. Cause, you know, Kirk can attest, there's a lot going on. Like, and sometimes we got to shift on a dime and.
Well,
so-
that's what I was saying. For one child, I didn't work for 3 years
Mhm.
to get to all of her appointments.
And we have families who have 2 or 3 kids that are in that boat.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you said something too, Erin, that I really loved. You said, we still care about our students once they even leave.
Mhm.
And their community is very small.
Mhm.
And I think that at Meridian, that's what belonging really means. So I think that's great. So
Yeah.
that's great.
Yep. One thing I do want to just point out, so this is that data sheet that I was talking about. And so you have the categories on the left-hand side. So, you know, developmental delay, EBD, orthopedic impaired, all that. So those are the different categories that students can qualify into in special education. Down on the bottom, just to give you guys a little bit of a sense in terms of new kids coming in and what that process looks like. We processed 60 new referrals last year in the Meridian School District. 12 of those referrals were from birth to 2 and ESIT, which is students transitioning from supported by community partners in the early childhood or early intervention program. And we have to do evaluations and either qualifying them or not before they turn age 3. And then we had some community preschool referrals. So that's usually going to end up looking like, you know, maybe it's a grandparent who has a concern about their student, or it's opportunity council, different things like that. And then, so those are our early childhood. Everything else was, you know, kindergarten up. And of those 60, only 10 did not qualify. So just to give you a sense of, you know, in terms of new kids coming into our system, that's really what that's looking like.
And what are your opportunities for grants and finding funding? For all these, okay.
Well, it's a federal law. IDEA is a federal law, and it's a severely underfunded
Right.
federal law. It's a law that's never been, it was a mandate that they then threw some money at, and they've never really funded it properly. So right now it falls on the state legislature and it falls on local money to help us navigate that. I got a guy behind me here who could probably talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the federal special ed money has been stagnant for
Right.
like 10 years here. It just doesn't go up. So what happens is you'll have people that we pay for out of federal. And then slowly the amount that you pay for out of federal goes down as their salary goes up. You just have to move that to your state. Sped dollars, we overspend those too, which basically means you're taking out of your basic and your levy and all that.
Well, it's interesting because the legislature has us do some more reporting on how, like, there's been some increase in funding over the last 6 years. And so they came up with this new survey this year that they sent out, and they asked, like, from year to year, what have you added to your program? And, you know, we've collectively talked as a county team, and one of the biggest things that we can have to say in that is, this is just to help us maintain.
Yeah.
Like this is just to help us maintain our current staffing. Yes, we've had to add this or we've had to add that, but that's coming out of local money. I don't think you can turn around and say that that's the necessarily increase because we're already overspending it.
Mhm.
So, you know, I hope the legislature sees that, and I hope that they understand what we're trying to tell them, which is help.
Yeah.
So,
Can you give me one example? We're sorry to ask you
Yeah.
a question, but it says that 10 students were found not to be eligible. Can you give us an example of someone who's not eligible?
Yeah, so to qualify for special education services, you need to have a documented disability and an educational need. And so there are students who have that disability, but when we go through and we do the evaluation, the assessments to determine whether the student's eligible, their skills are high enough that they're not showing as needing that level of support. A lot of those students will end up with a 504 plan where they can be served through accommodation and different things like that, but it's not necessarily they need to have that special ed intervention of specialized instruction.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
I'd like to thank Aaron for what you and Adrian have done over the years. I mean, from what I've seen, really turning the special ed program around and making it very successful. You know, quite frankly, in my personal opinion, 2016, 2017, it was tanking. We had poor leadership at best, as far as I'm concerned, just what you guys have done over the years and stuff like that to turn things around. You know, like subconsciously, people like to be led. I think they have that now. So I just want to say I appreciate everything that you guys do for our community. So thank you, you're valuable employees.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Thanks. Thanks. I'm gonna go lay down. Thanks.
Get there?
Oh, I'll get there.
All right, Joe. District technology plan.
I'm gonna flip through, I added a couple of documents that, earlier this week late, and so I really wanna get through most of it, and so we can focus a little bit more on those, because those are new things, and there's some details in there I wanna share. So, but if you have any questions along the way, feel free to stop. Like, just reiterating, you know, technology is everywhere, everything, everybody uses technology. And so it's hard to, you know, narrow down where we align in the strategic plan because we're everywhere. But again, primarily we're centered around learning. So what I want to do is provide, since we're finishing up the 2021-2024 levy, just doing a quick recap of where we are as far as the expenditures. And what we still have remaining costs to go. So within the levy, we focused on having instructional coaches. We were able to add a second instructional coach last year. So we have one for K-5 and one for 6-12. PD is something that we still is a struggle to properly invest in. And so we underspent there. But which worked out well because we ended up funneling a lot of that extra into curriculum software. And I'll call out too, like you got a presentation on formative that is directly provided in part because of the machines that we have that support formative and as well as the funding to buy that software comes out of the tech levy. Learning spaces, I shared in one of my last meetings, so we've updated the visual technology in the middle school and IREV classrooms, similar to what we have here. One of the remaining projects we have is to complete a sound system installation in those classrooms as well, so that teachers will have a lanyard with a microphone, 4 speakers in the ceilings in all of those classes. We have the speakers on site. We're still working with a vendor on the control module with the microphones. But we're anticipating doing an install of the speakers over Christmas break and then following back with the rest of it well before the end of the school year.
Cool.
Yeah, we installed it into Jacob Dennis's classroom here as kind of a beta test, and his group had volunteered him. He uses that every single day. And he can speak normally, comfortably, and everybody in the room can hear him, so. Just an acknowledgement too, you know, one of the other things that weren't necessarily directly part of the DD planning that were focused, but they were acknowledged was safety and communication. So we were able to upgrade our phone system district-wide, and we were also able to increase our cameras and add cameras to the middle school. So we have 19 camera locations. We currently have 72 cameras at the middle school. Most of the cameras we buy are 4-lens cameras, so we can do a single location, but get all 4 directions from that location. Again, devices and infrastructure, we're gonna go delve a little bit deeper on this. down in the other sheets, but just again, some of what we originally planned, and what we actually did. So our original plan for student devices, we were going to do a shared device between two students at the K-5 level and a one-to-one 6-12. And then we shut down. So that all shift, we went one-to-one district-wide. Some of that worked out well because then we were also able to tap some federal dollars. We had over $500,000 from federal government to offset some of the cost of our purchases of devices for students. And we also received substantial Whatcom County Cares covered our first year of all of our leases for just shy of a quarter.
Wow.
And of course, you know, with our adoption and that, there were always additional costs that we didn't realize that we were gonna need along the way. And so just a breakdown of some of what we spent extra on.
Jay, the cost of the additional Chromebooks,
Yes,
are you able to kind of give us a little breakdown of those were new, for the new versus, for lost?
and I'm gonna, yeah, that's that sheet I wanna get to.
Okay.
I'm gonna go into that, because that's,
Then we touched on that before.
any questions, any of the other parts so far? Part of the next, proposal for the 2025-2028 levy, it's essentially going to be a repeat of the devices. We will be looking at student devices again. As part of the plan, we are looking at infrastructure updates to the high school, the IREA campus, and MP3, because the technology as of right now in all those classrooms is 11 years old. And so by the time we get to the point in the levy, they'll be pushing 13 or 14 years. So as I said, you know, some of our main goals, completing the audio in middle school and IRED. We have security cameras for the MP3 campus that are on site, and the infrastructure is in place. They just need installation. We do have a couple of remaining locations that are challenging for the middle school. Jay and I have been working, and Jay has a bid project to get a generator installed for the district head end. So if the district high school campus ever loses power, typically that would shut down phones and internet for the other two campuses. That's part of our plan, was to have a spot on generator that kicks on anytime power goes out, so we don't have a loss of learning or safety issues at the other campuses during that. And I just want to thank, like, I've got a great team. It is a small team for what we're trying to do, but I really appreciate all the hard work that they do. Okay, so this part. So this is something that I've wanted to add as a focus on kind of our inventory and our fleet status. And so this is our first pass at this. This is specific to our iPad adoption. And so in this adoption, we originally planned for 160 iPads total. And we estimated the cost, the expenditure of that was going to be $66,000. When we went out to lease the devices, we actually ended up having to lease 400 units. And the total cost of that for that lease was $181,000. Through the course of that lease, at the end of the lease, we've purchased out all of the devices through various funds. And so this is where it started, I wanted to look at. So that $232,000 for the total cost of now that we own those devices, $45,000 was provided us by Whatcom County funds in support of our first year of lease payments. $66,000 was provided through a grant program through the federal government that allowed us to take some of those devices. Within the first year, we actually bought the lease out on those devices and they became ours. And so $120,000 was actually truly district dollars from the levy that was invested in those devices. And then the following ones are kind of a breakdown of where those pieces came from. The additional costs are other things. So we ended up buying another 50 units of iPads. There is a variety of reasons around that. Some of it is just loss, some of it is damage. Some of it is enrollment changes, some of it is need changes, so. It is, right, like, I'll have a good explanation. One of the areas that I was more frustrated, but actually working out the numbers, I'm slightly less frustrated, so. We have 450 total iPads. We have purchased 325 additional chargers. And that has been a thorn in my side for years, but then I sat down and that amounted to $12,000. So there's a cost of doing business, and, you know, we're gonna continue to encourage people to bring this equipment back, we're going to do that. But at the end of the day, you know, when we're talking about, you know, close to $250,000 over 4 years, $12,000 is $12,000. So, we had some incidental repairs as well that I included there. So the last part of this is that after 4 years, what did the iPad specifically cost us? And then what was our total district cost? So my goal with this is to look at, so if we had gone out in 2020 and bought them outright, each of those iPads would have cost the district $443. Through all of this, at the end of 4 years, they actually cost our district with all the repairs, $350 each. So we benefited from everything and we got the devices less expensive. Sorry. All right, so fleet status. This breaks down where devices are. So out of the 450 total iPads, 46 of them were damaged and then replaced through Apple Care. So we buy Apple Care on our devices for the iPads. It's a 4-year Apple Care that we get special because we're a school district. And currently, Apple does not charge us anything for broken devices. And so, it's about an hour-long process per device, but they will take anything back. We've had devices that the headphone jack just got stuck, we get a new device. We've had devices that I would imagine got run over by a car, we got a new device. So almost any condition, they have not refused anything. And so that's been definitely been worth the expense for bringing that up in front. All right, so let's talk a little bit about loss. And I'm gonna use, I probably should have put loss in quotes. I feel like nothing is truly lost until you give up looking for it and try to recover it, right? And so we put forth a lot of effort on recovery around this in locations. And so I'm gonna start on the right side first. And so inactive students that did not return a device, right? These are the people that we're reaching out to, the families who are working with the buildings. And so it's most of our effort centered around that very top line, so 0 days. So we get a notification now from our Skyward, anytime a student enrollment changes from active to inactive. An email message comes to me, my system automatically forwards it onto our tech help system. And so then my team goes in, they see those messages, they take that message, and then they pass it on to the building. First, they check our inventory to make sure that it hasn't been returned. Then they pass those messages off to the buildings and say, this device as of now has not been returned. Please reach out to the family and recover our device. We've done that now for about 1.5 years, and we've had better success on getting devices back with that reach out. And then I have him continue to follow up either once a week or every other week with the buildings to say, we're still looking for this device. So that one we push most of our effort towards because that's going to give us the most return. So then the next box down, greater than 90 days of no contact. So there's a window still in there. We're 3 months out. If we still haven't received that device out, we're still going to put forth effort towards recovery. But the probability of with an inactive student that's been 90 days, the likelihood that we're going to get that device back is diminishing. And once we clear over half a year, again, we're still going to reach out, but by that time, we're less likely. And then once it hits 500 days, I don't take it off the inventory, so we put it on kind of essentially a watch list. And so anytime a device connects to the internet at all, I get a notification in our system that tracks this device connected at this date. And there's some other metrics we can look at, sadly not GPS, but there are other metrics we can look at. So any time these devices that exceed the 500 days, once they trick back on our watch list, then we can focus on recovery again. And it's helpful because we can say, well, yes, we understand that you said you don't have it, but why did it all of a sudden get turned on? And it appears to be coming from, your place, right? And I'll share with that, one of those 500 days iPads that we've assumed. After 2 years, it randomly just happened to show up in the library sitting on a desk and was broken, which then went to Apple Care and was completely replaced, but. So they're not gone forever.
It randomly showed up.
It just randomly shows up.
But, okay, I know I'm a board member, but I'm also
Yep.
paying my taxes.
Oh, yeah,
So are you saying that there's 230 missing or unaccounted for devices right now?
for the iPad specifically, there are 80 that are in question.
Only
So,
80. Okay,
yeah.
so when you're saying the devices with no contact or inactive students did not return device, that 230 isn't accurate?
Where are you seeing, are you on the Chromebook?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll get to the Chromebook. And so yes, that is accurate. but-
So the replacement cost of that is over $120,000.
To some degree. And I don't disagree with that. So there's two. The replacement cost is the replacement cost, and that is correct. So that is part of the challenge that we're having right now.
Just talking about iPad.
I know, I'm good.
No, it's fine. It all conflates together. But so for iPads, we have 30 devices, right?
I'll do the math on that too.
Which is fine. No, I appreciate that. And that's why I included the pricing on this, because there's two pricing structures, right? One is replacing like with like, and one is replacing like with new. And so the value of like for like. It's a different value.
What grade are we giving iPads to versus Chromebooks?
iPads are TK through first grade. And so they
TK?
TK. If they're on site and they're actively engaged in using technology.
Through first grade, so we,
And they're going home?
As of right now, and so this is another complexity we have as part of the federal dollars that we receive. And so there was a 3-year window where we were required to, these were provided to us to support technology at home. And that was a grant program for that.
That's
So
part of the way the grant's written.
so the funding was a 3-year, we're just,
That's why we ask. What's going on with grant dollars
Right.
behind the scenes?
but at the time, and they'll say too, like, yeah, that's perfectly, but at the time too, we were in the middle of a pandemic and we were home, so.
Sure, makes
There's
sense.
about, right, so, that ends this year, and we've already had conversations of, and I wanna be clear, like, from my perspective, the goal isn't, is it a take-home device or not? It's more of, what is the value of it being a take-home device, and then make the decision of whether or not it's a take-home device. Most of our elementary conversations, it's probably not gonna be a take-home device, right? But I'll also say that some of that won't necessarily change loss either, because there's always gonna be some level of loss and recovery.
Is there any fine for like families for loss or damage of technology?
So at this time, no fines have been assigned.
I used to get fined for leaving a book home.
100%.
And I stressed about that.
I don't think.
So we
There's
can't
like
have
no
accountability, but we're required to provide this, so that in the real world, that makes no sense.
And I agree, like, this has been a struggle for me, and
Oh,
I,
I appreciate your efforts. I totally get it. Like, I'm sure you're a taxpayer too.
and I'm at core, I am a steward, and so it does not feel good to, as all of these things where I highlight, like, this is areas that we want to maximize our local dollars, right? And the part of the reason I bring this is an area that we're challenged.
Because I'm pretty sure we can find some really great things to spend an extra $120,000 on for services and special education and a million other things we have needs for.
Well, if we have 2,050 total Chromebooks, and we're only missing 230.
And I do want to get to the Chromebook one, so I want to, let me finish this one real quick. So with that inactive students, that is what it is. I will say we'll likely recover the 9, we may recover the 2, the 12 for the 500 days no contact. We're probably not going to. On the other side of the list are devices with no contact to district system. So this one gets kind of weedy. So, and I'm gonna go with the 90 days no contact. So this is something we've been implementing for the past few months. What we're finding is we weren't noticing a device going missing until that student was gone. And then we look back and say, oh, well, you know, Steve unenrolled a month ago, where's his device? Once we got involved. So we've tried to make more metrics where we're catching it. Oh, well, Steve unenrolled today, where's his device? The other thing that we're looking at is when, what we'll basically say is when a device goes dark, right? So we have this constant, every time a device, an iPad in particular, every time an iPad is used, it phones home to Apple and it connects to our system. So it increments that time date stamp. So my question now for my team, okay, great, I've got 21 devices. They haven't been used in the last 90 days. Why is that? And so that isn't necessarily lost at this time. And so that column, and I'll get the first 2 of those, the 90 day and the 180 days, those aren't lost, but they are on my radar because we want to know, we're physically checking. Like, show me, you know, where to go to the kid and we're like, let me see your device. Oh, okay, what's that? Some of this can be just bad data. Some of it, the kid's forgotten at home months on end and they're using, like, there's reasons behind, but you have to go and look at each device individually and do detective work on that. And so our goal with that is right now we're starting looking at a 90 day, right? We're gonna keep ratcheting that down until we're looking at a 2 week. So if a device isn't been used in 2 weeks, we want to know from the child. We also want to know from the staff, what's that kid been doing then for 2 weeks, right? Maybe they were out sick for 2 weeks. So like, there's a story there. And that's part of it is us figuring out the story. We also have to have the time to invest to figure out the story on each of these. So there's those 2 fields that are handled differently. And how we focus on that. All right, we good with iPads? Yeah. All right, Chromebooks. Talk about money first. So originally planned 1,200 Chromebooks. We were figuring it was going to be about a $686,000 investment. We came to the lease. We actually leased 1,675 devices, and our lease actually landed about where we were planning to spend. When we start to look at the cost of the actual cost of the lease program itself to run the whole lease and then buy them out. Again, Whatcom County helped us. They paid that first year of lease for just shy of $100,000. We had federal grant dollars for $500,000. So in the end, our actual district dollars that were spent on Chromebooks from the lease part was $188,000. So $112 per device is what our local tax dollars will put towards those devices. And that breaks it down, how much we had to pay as part of the, our side of the grant buyout, what our direct lease payments were, and then how much we paid for at the end of the lease to buy the devices off of a lease. I will share here that our cost to buy devices from the lease was $30 per Chromebook, because that is their perceived value of what they were at this point in time. We did add 300 over the course of 4 years. We've added 375 devices. This last batch we bought 150 to add to the device carts that we have in each of the buildings to support when kids devices are in damage or need repair. Because we find that we're also right now having some challenges around that, because now we're doing in-house repairs. We're finding that is way more time consuming than we had even anticipated. One Chromebook, it's hard determining the problems. You can spend 2 hours doing just doing a tear down to fix a broken screen. Right now, we're also starting to look at devices around the repair realm of devices that have more than 3 issues become parts for repairing other devices, because it's not cost effective for us to spend that time. And Again, same thing, chargers are a challenge. We don't typically, it's slightly better than the iPads, but we still don't always get chargers back, and these are kind of to some extent understand an iPad charger, because we all have iPad chargers floating around at home, but a Chromebook charger looks like a laptop charger, so. And this doesn't too also, that 700 units also counts for anything that a charger was broken, like the dog chewed through it or any of those things. We did invest in additional Chromebook cases. We found after, use, they do not hold up as well as we thought. And so we've added there, but we have not continued to buy those because the price of those are starting to actually exceed the price of a used Chromebook of that model. So in the end, total overall cost. Each of the devices that we had, including the additional devices, $477 per device. Our district dollars invested in those were $184, and that's including all of the additional cost of repairs and extra components.
So going forward, we can assume there won't be federal dollars. So these are going to be totally at our expense.
Correct, as part of the levy. Which we did calculate in as part of our levy request. It is calculated in to continue and what it would cost. And we're always looking for grant programs that might support it.
I'd say, I have to give you an example. I was in the high school office. And a staff member's child was also in the office. And there were 4 Chromebooks in the backpack. 4.
Yeah.
So we gotta fix something, something's broke.
Did we get those 4 back?
I was like, I don't have a poker face, so I was like stunned as the staff member looked at me, knowing how I was thinking at the time. No, the 4 left in the backpack.
And again, this isn't pretty stuff, this isn't nice stuff, this sucks.
Yeah.
But that's also why I want to present to this, because I think this is something we need to have we need to share with you, and also, it is also stuff that we are having conversations around, is how we correct this.
And we were actually just wondering why the backpack was so heavy. That was how the whole thing came about, finding out what was in the backpack.
And so we do have, one of my challenges, we have data that isn't. I might not be able to tell you, student has 4 devices, but I can see that that student has a tendency to log into multiple devices in a short window. And so then but again, everything is, making the time to pull through all the different data. So this data that I'm doing for our metrics, right? So I'm pulling data from Skyward, from student Skyward to get demographic information, student information, family information. I'm pulling data from fiscal. I am pulling data from Google and Apple, and then I'm pulling data from our own internal inventory system. And I'm trying to mesh all of those different databases together to get some results that have meaning, because none of them on their own give me the data that I'm looking for to find what's going on here. All right, loss on the Chrome. So I have an update to this too. So I want to say part of it too is, and I apologize for this, so I didn't include, this data is fairly volatile, right? So for example, and it's still. All right. This is the data when I pulled it on Sunday, right? These are the results, and I went through. I pulled it this morning or mid-morning today, right? So our inactive devices that students didn't return went from 77 to 49. Our devices, I'll just go down the list. So inactive students 90-day went from 23 to 24. Inactive students 180-day went from 37 to 36. 500-day no contact for inactive students went from 93 to 94. So again, a lot of focus on that top area that happened. On the devices with no contact to district systems, the 93 on 90-day went to 24. The 180-day, from 75 to 34, and the 500-day just stayed at 59. So overall, we saw a small decrease. We went from a percentage wise for the inactive students, we went from 11.22 to 9.9%. And then we went from the devices with no district contact, we went from 10.59% to 5.22%. Which is good. There is, but it's tomorrow, it's gonna be something different, right? And so every day this is an area that, so we've been focused really on that 0-day immediately recovery. And we've also been doing the 90-day where we go out and we look for devices and we see what it is. Some of this, and every single one of these devices, half an hour to an hour, figure out what's going on. Some of it is just when you're merging those 4 systems, some of it's just bad data. I will share at least 50 of those devices on the devices with no contact. It's because our devices, when reporting to Google, we're reporting with a different serial number. So our serial numbers on devices report to Google. In our inventory, when you scan the serial number barcode code, it has a leading S. When they report to Google, it does not have a leading S. And these are devices we just picked up off lease and didn't realize that. So then it negatively, so that was a quick fix and impacts our data. But then you have other ones where a student is on the inactive, did not return a device. So we look at that kid, oh, well, no, it's not that Steve didn't return a device. Steve did return a device. Steve returned Marty's device. So, and Marty's using Steve devices, or sometimes even Marty's really using Michelle's device because Michelle's using Jana's, but Jana is no longer enrolled. So she returned Steve's device, who was also not enrolled. And it's just the detective work of finding him as we go through and we clean it up. So some of it is going to be that, but at the core, that's why I say there is no one fix for anything. There's things we need more accountability, which we're working on, and having conversations around too. And I will share too, like accountability doesn't necessarily have to be dollars, right? Accountability is just having that. There is accidents happen, but it doesn't necessarily mean you don't have any personal responsibility around accidents as well, right?
And you're getting head nods from students.
Right, yeah.
Push-ups.
So, because, $400 expense to anybody in this room means completely different thing to each of us. And so there's all of the balancing of how do you do that? How do you make that? How do you, these are a textbook for our students now. They don't have textbooks. Well, then you don't get a textbook, right? So how do you can't take away somebody's learning. So these are the conversations that we're having around this. But at the end of the day, we also need to address this. And so how much of this is the cost of just having a one-to-one adoption? How much of this is a cost of not having enough accountability? How much of this is a cost of that they're a take-home device? And then if there's a cost associated with them being a take-home device, then, are we getting value out of that warrants the expense of the loss? And so this will be a continuing report that's going to come every time I come visit you. We're going to revisit this because inventory is always a challenge, especially now, in the last 4 years since we've gone to this. So.
Joe's not mission. He's really short-staffed. He's had open positions forever that just get taken out of the budget.
I think he's doing a great job.
Technology, I don't know how he runs it with 2 guys. He literally has 2 guys and he has one. He has one person that he contracts with the ESD, and then he has a student person. Is that it, Joe?
Yeah,
we just run around with it all the time.
We don't contract with ESD anymore because they are available to us if we need them. But I think they're up to $120 an hour. We try not to need them. So.
Yeah, when Joe gets asked to give something up, he says yes.
You're doing a great job.
You are doing a great job. This is not on you. This is just our policies. And that's us.
It's the accountability.
Yeah.
We've.
Yeah.
Management has decided we don't have any accountability for it. And that's an intentional decision we made since we started. So this is kind of the result of that. That's part of it, not all of it, but you know.
Well, I don't wanna make sure we're not diminishing, like, everybody has a part in this, right? The teacher who, are. If I go to hardware sales and I rent something and I borrow something, right? If I don't bring it back to hardware sales. Then they're gonna come after me, right?
Right.
With our system, though. There isn't a. Clear point of contact for families sometimes, and so there's like. We've had devices that are given to a teacher, we have devices sometimes are shown to a parent, there's a drawer at one of our schools that devices just miraculously appear. And so we're trying to build systems, I feel like, if we had this thing, we would have a receipting system where you check out a device. And when you return it, you get a receipt. When we do senior returns for my department, when seniors come in with their devices, we have a paper receipt. Every kid who turns in a device gets a receipt. If they turn in a device that's not the device that we assigned them, we X out because we pre-print them like, this is the device you had. Well, you turned a different device. What is that device? All right, we're gonna cross this one out. We're gonna write this one up because we're gonna find why did you return in a different device? But we still take it back because it's ours. And so we have processes, but it's harder too because that's something we're doing as our team, but we're not in every building all the time. And so we have to hand things out. And so.
But that receipt really doesn't mean anything to that senior because they're gonna get their diploma anyway, with or without the receipt.
And I'll share too, even with like the diploma, back in the day, you'd say, well, you're not gonna get your diploma. We legally can't do that anymore. I think correct me if I'm wrong, it's like $2,000 in fines before that's even an option. And so. Yeah, that's a challenge, so.
You're doing a great job within the parameters you've been given.
And what I don't want to discount any, like, everybody is doing the best we can, trying to mitigate this. I will share one more anecdote and then I'll be done. So. We've adopted that technology, we're gonna use technology for our curriculum, right? We wanna make sure that kids get the device as quickly as possible, so they're not being hampered in learning, right? That's kind of the decision we've made. I will share, I've got a friend in another school district in my role. They also have adopted that, but they require every parent to sign off every time a device, which is a great thing. Like every parent, when the kid gets a device, parent has to sign off. They do not issue a device to that child until the parent actively signs off. Which.
I did that. I had to do that.
Yeah, we did it in the very initial.
I had to do that.
And it's been. Quickly went, so we did it in the very first rollout and we backed away from it a bit because we were challenged on getting that. And so students weren't getting devices, which I'll get to. So with this case in this district, they have slightly more number of kids than we do. 1 month into school, over 500 of their kids did not have their device because their parents hadn't signed off on the paperwork. Now what do you do? So those kids don't have a textbook effectively for a whole month of school. They can't access the learning, there are things that we want to look at on how to do that. Also, though, we're keeping an eye on not hampering kids as well, so. Fun stuff.
Cost of doing business.
Yeah. It's a moving target. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Oh, my battery isn't working.
Go, do you want?
I'm
do you
kidding.
want-
I'm kidding.
We're gonna attack it.
Okay. We're gonna be moving on to old business. This is the second review and approval of policy and procedure 3205. Sex discrimination and sex-based harassment. Kennedy and Logan, do you have any opinion on this procedure? And policy?
I would vote to choose. I would also vote.
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve the second review and approval of policy and procedure 3205?
I'll make a motion to approve, 3205.
1 second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Second review and approval policy and procedure 3206, pregnant and parenting students. Logan Kennedy.
I would vote to approve. I would second.
Okay,
I'll make a motion to approve policy 3206, pregnant and parenting students.
okay,
I'll second.
okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Second review and approval policy and procedure 5011, sex discrimination, and sex-based harassment of district staff prohibited. Kennedy and Logan.
I would vote to approve. I would second.
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve policy and procedure 5011?
I make a motion to adopt policy procedure 5011 as detailed in the attachments.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Second review and approval policy and procedure 5012. Parent, family, marital status and pregnancy. Kennedy and Logan.
I would vote to approve. I would second.
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve policy and procedure 5012?
I'll make a motion to approve policy and procedure 5012.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, moving on to new business, and just so everybody's aware, these are both action items. And. Our role will be presented.
So this is a interlocal agreement between the Washington State Skills Center Association and Meridian School District. This is something that Director Brower of Northwest Korean Technical Academy has been working with legislatures on for a while and wanting to move forward as part of the Washington State Skills Center Association. Earlier, I think last year, Dr. Everett went down and promoted this bill. What the legislature did is the bill did not pass, but the legislature said we will do a proviso. And so we will allocate $1.4 million for small schools. And from those small schools, there's a qualification which is outlined in the interlocal agreement. But what they did is that $1.4 million is going to be dispersed among those qualifying schools in 2 allotments. The first one is in December, and then the second one is in April. In December, the state will be dispersing $600,000 to schools across Washington State. And then in April, they will be dispersing $800,000 to schools across Washington State. In December, Meridian has qualified for $17,000. So for us to receive those funds from the state, we need this interlocal agreement in place, and then we can utilize those funds. With those funds, there are no restrictions necessarily on what we utilize them for. So they could be utilized to support students, they could be utilized to make up some of the lost FTE. And so this is an action item for tonight. And for the record, Dr. Everett has recommended the board to pass it.
So I'll make a motion to approve the.
I gotta ask.
Oh, I'm
Kennedy-
sorry, I'm sorry.
I gotta ask Kennedy and Logan, I messed this up so many times.
Try to get to sleep, I get delusional.
Kennedy and Logan, how do you feel about this interlocal agreement?
I'd vote to approve. I'd second.
Okay, can I get a motion from Marty?
All right, sorry. I'm sorry. I make a motion to approve the interlocal agreement between the Washington State Skills Center Association and Meridian School District.
I will second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Alright,
Aye.
okay, moving on. Levy certification resolution, also an action item.
Right.
Mr. Daniel.
So I'm gonna speak to this one. This is a resolution that we'll see every year. Basically what it does is so when you do your budgeting, you make a projection on what your levy authority will be. And then when the actual information comes out from the county assessor, then you do this resolution and it allows you to collect up to what your actual levy authority is. And so there's really no impact for the debt service fund and the tech levy. But when you look at, and it's scrolling strange, okay, when you look at B there, so the voters passed the levy for 6 million. And when we budgeted, it looked like the OSPI value of the levy authority was 5,868,000. And now it's looking like it's gonna be closer to the 6 million. So what this does, it allows us to collect up to our full levy authority. And so it's a reoccurring resolution you'll see each year, and it's due at the end of November. So that's why it's a single reading on that one.
Any questions? Okay. Getting you voted? How do you feel about it?
I would vote for this. I would second.
Okay. I get a motion to approve the
Levy resolution.
the levy certificate resolution 12-24.
I'll make a motion to approve levy certification resolution 1224.
I'll second.
Yep, all those in favor?
Aye.
You're up again.
Okay, it's still me,
That does include new business, but we still get some Daniel.
and it's good to be here in person. It's hard to read the room when you're on Zoom, so happy to be here. Like figure out how to go to the next. Just scrolling over to the right.
Can't escape.
Doing slow, little.
Reading the next. And go forward.
You can, yeah.
Thank you.
That's the girls first.
Okay, cool. What would we do without Joe? Okay, so this is coming to you. So the first budget projection report comes a little bit late, mostly because I'm so busy with the year-end close in September, October, November. So anyway, this is the September budget projection report. There might be some adjustments to fund balance, which I'll speak to later. But I do wanna kind of, at the first pass through it, I like to kind of just describe how you read the report. So you got the months across the top, and then whichever month we're looking at will be a little bit larger in font and highlighted. You can see the apportionment percentage up at the top. So we end up getting 100% of our apportionment throughout the year, but it's a different amount each month. Another thing to note is we're funded, all of our revenues that we take in from the state were funded based on our budget through December, and then in January, there's like a square up that happens. So if we're up in enrollment, then we get an additional monies to catch us up. If we're down enrollment, then what they would do is reduce the money that we receive in January to make up for that difference. So you don't want to be in that scenario. It looks like we'll be up though. And it does vary, the percentages vary. Part of it varies depending on when we're doing our levy collections. And so they typically will give us a lower portion amount near levy collections because they know that we're getting money from another source. But then also there's these, at the end of the year, it's pretty weird where they give us a really low percentage right at the end of May and June. and then a high percentage in July and August, and that was one year when the state was having trouble balancing their budget. They just pushed off all the school payments to the next biennium. And so that's stuck around. And then you have this green highlight here. This is kind of a nice, like, we're looking at the green, and pink is a nice way to just check in on how enrollment's doing. The green is the actual, and you can see the first 3 months there, September, October, November inputted. We had 1763 in September, 1786 in October, and 1791 in November. And then the pink shows you what we budgeted. So, and then you've got the fund balance there, and then in this revenue section, so you get most of your, this first line, the property collections, you get most of it in October and April. And so you'll get a little bit before each of those months because of the early collections. You know, people are paying early, and then a little bit will trickle through in the other months. Then you have all of these figures that start with the 3 or 4. That's money that comes from the state. And some of those grants we don't receive in September. So if like final approval hasn't been made and all the steps that you have to take, it's pretty common to get some of those grants in October or November. Kurt handles most of those, and he does a really good job, and typically we get them in October, which is pretty early. Then you have all of the federal grants start with a 6, and a lot of times we don't collect those monies until November, December for the first payment, and then you'll get like a double payment at the end of the year. Those are all reimbursement basis. So what that means is we spend the money first, and then we do a claim, and then they send us the money the next month, the following month. That's how those typically work. And then you have any of the revenue streams that start with a 7, those come from another school district. So typically you'll see that like this school site reimbursement. This means we're sharing an employee with another school district. So in this case, Linden School District. So we hired the employee, they work for us part of the time, and they work for Linden the other part of the time. We pay them out, and then we invoice them. You know, they're our employee, and they pay Linden pays us back for their portion of the salary. So it's common to have at least one of those employees each year. And then you have the ones that start with an 8. Those are our Whatcom County grants. There's the Whatcom 1/10 grant, which is 108,000, and it's been at that level for quite some time. It was 90,000 a few years ago, bumped up to 108. And then we have Whatcom Health employees. This one's kind of cool. There's a grant through the ESD that will provide mental health professionals for us that at a cost of $50,000. And then we were able to get a grant from Whatcom County that pays that portion. So there isn't actually an expense out of pocket for the district. It's pretty rare that you're able to use 2 grants to pay for something like that, and it's allowable, but we did run it through both organizations first before we went through that. And then you have down at the bottom of the revenues, the transfers in that we get. So all of our tech levy expenditures run through the general fund, and then we do a transfer from the capital projects fund to the general fund. And there's also, now that we're running some big capital projects coming up, we are paying some salary
for that, and then, so that will run through the general fund, and then we'll do a transfer from the capital projects to cover that. So another thing about this is, this report is you can see, so each month it tells you how much money we receive, but if you look over to the right, you can see the budgeted amount for each of our revenue streams. So that's kind of some interesting information if you're ever curious about, you know, how much we get for Title I or various other grants and whatnot. And then on the expense side, it's broken down into salaries and benefits and accounts payable. And so if you look at the far right where it's the budget column, it has the full budgeted amount, and then it's just divided out for each month. And so that's kind of how you read it. September is typically a pretty low revenue month for the district, and it's because you don't receive all your revenue streams right at the beginning of this school year. And it's also a high month for expenditures, specifically accounts payable, because in August, we're basically running. So if you remember when you're approving the accounts payable, you end up seeing like one for last fiscal year and then one for the next fiscal year. And so anything that is an expense for the next school year ends up getting charged to that next school year, and then it hits the books in September. And so that's why you see a pretty high amount for accounts payable. So 722,000 in September. Questions? On the budget status report, so same as normal, the general fund, the budget projection report just has more information. You can always tie that out. I did want to point out in the capital projects fund, so with these projects that we're going to be undertaking, we got our first payment. This is a $200,000 grant for from the Whatcom Community Foundation. And this is for the Whatcom Early Learning Center. The other update I have is kind of on the year-end close process. So the first step is submitting the F-196 to OSPI. So that's been done and completed. The next step after that, there's a report, a financial statement called the CFA, Schedule of Expenditures of Federal Awards. And that gets submitted to directly to our auditors at the end of November. And so I have all the inputs for that done. I do that as part of the F-196 process. But the submission, I'll be doing that next week. Then you have the next main phase is the notes to the financial statement. So it's a whole nother like 30 pages of stuff that you have to do. And that isn't due until the auditors come on site. And that information isn't quite available yet. So it's kind of one of those where you have to just kind of piece out the work that you're doing. So one thing of note with the F-196, there's one account that there's a discrepancy between our system and the Whatcom County Treasurer. And so what I've done is I spent a lot of time trying to research it and figure out, why there's this discrepancy. And once I, kind of spun my wheels as much as I could, what I did is reached out to our software company. So there's something that is happening in our process that is causing discrepancy between the county. And so I'm contracting out with them to research it, basically do some forensic accounting to really drill down, figure out what's causing that. It's likely some kind of like human error in one of our process things where we're putting the wrong date or something like that. And so as far as like the accounting that happens behind the scenes of the system, something is happening there. So we're researching that. And once I figure out
what that is, then I'll do a correcting entry and that'll make an adjustment to the, the F-196, and that'll happen for the auditor's account as well. So it's been a bit of a challenging year in close. I mean, partially because last year was just crazy busy and with the budget reductions and everything. And then also trying to research this, like it was like 60 hours of trying to figure this out, and then really just happened to kind of throw in the towel and be like, I need help. And so reached out for help, and so now we've got somebody else that's kind of looking at it from a different lens that really understands what the system, the entries that the system does when you know, click the various buttons and go through the process for payroll and AP or accounts payable. So anyway, working through that.
We trust you.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any questions?
I love that you were proactive in looking for help.
Yeah.
That's his
Yeah.
volumes.
I mean, it's hard to admit that you need help sometimes.
That's what I was saying, like,
but-
especially with the accounting mind.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, well, do we have any information from student board representatives this evening?
Oh, yeah, we do. So we met with like the middle school a couple weeks ago, and we met with Dr. Everett last week. And talked about implementing some sort of student advisory at MP3. So tomorrow, we're gonna meet with Michelle Seidel and talk about that.
Very cool. It's awesome, Rose.
Did you guys have your first meeting at the middle school? No, that's gonna be, it's like difficult to drive over here, so like
So far.
the middle school, I know. No, like getting permission for like the, yeah, imaging class is difficult, but so. Mrs. Hammock, the middle school vice principal, is taking on that role, leading it.
Cool. Okay. Anything else, ladies? Do we have any information from board directors?
I just have a concern. My phone was going off during the meeting. There was a PTA meeting this evening. And the PTA president shared with the attendees and the Zoom attendees that the district is looking at changing our mascot to a less European version. We have some parents that are concerned that we are looking at that.
Thank you for that.
I said as a board, we didn't know anything.
I knew that PTA was looking at a mascot costume.
That was also in there. However, the president shared that the district is looking to go a less European version out of the Trojan.
Awareness for me too. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay,
I like the Trojan.
well, we can sign some official documents and adjourn.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Around 20 minutes, just,
I was on one side last week.
Yeah.
oh, yeah.
You missed it.
Cause we were here, yeah. No, I wanted to go though. Last week.
For leadership or honor society? Okay.
Maybe you can get,
Good.
honor society out.
Hours, yeah, that's, I remember the
I'm
younger.
not leaving again, Janice.
Not, last time was bad.
Was it crazy?
We had the kids for temper.
No.
I was like, I sent the kids at the end, I was like, look, I'm not trying to get up parents, and I never be a parent. But oh my goodness, that just took like 10 years off my life. I know, I'm babysitting now for my job, and I'm just like, oh.
Where are you at, honey?
Well, there's some kids at BCS. I just like.
Like the outdoor program?